Hello and welcome to the GreenStream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the GreenStream today. I'm Terry Barclay, President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I am just absolutely thrilled that joining us today is Kathryn Snorrason, who is Vice President and Deputy Chief Mobility Officer, Michigan's Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. And I really look forward to learning more about what that groundbreaking effort is. And I'm sure that Kathryn will share that with us. But before we get started, Kathryn, could you share with us a little bit about your background story and how you got here? Because you've had a really interesting series of positions before taking on this role.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to. I'm a proud Michigander, grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, also a proud U of M alumni, go blue, graduated
Go
from
blue.
business school, go blue, absolutely. And so after graduating from U of M, moved out to Chicago for just a few years before returning, worked with Deloitte Consulting, had great experiences around the country. Some of them even took me international for some international development projects. And then from there, that sparked an interest in international development. So I was able to work for Kiva, focused on microloans, specifically placed in Rwanda for a fellowship, but was very excited to take that experience and move into the economic development space. And so I was able to do that for the city of Chicago, working for World Business Chicago, similar, it's an EDO for the city, and then bring the economic development experience back to Michigan to focus on mobility and electrification for the state. So at that time, I started with a group under Governor Snyder called Planet M for Michigan and Mobility. It was a brand campaign that started in 2017, kind of like Pure Michigan covers everything in tourism. Planet M covers everything in the mobility space. And if you're going to talk about all the great things happening in Michigan around mobility, you want to have programming, business development programs to support it as well, right? To support that company growth and that innovation. So that was the piece that I grew in positions over time and was able to lead the programming for Planet M. And then what we're here to talk about today, where I landed at the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification for the state of Michigan. Governor Whitmer created this office when she started, back in 2020, when she first became governor. And it was great to see the growth. Michigan's been working on mobility and electrification for a long time, but to see the growth to create this specific initiative to focus on policy and programming in the mobility and electrification space. So I know we'll get into a lot about our office, but I'm very happy to be part of this team and working on mobility and electrification for the state of Michigan.
It's just so exciting to hear. And I just have to say, I love that you're dreaming and thinking big. That's something that Sustainable Business Network of Detroit shares with you, because we see an opportunity, I think, that I guess is closely aligned to the work that you're doing of creating Michigan as a world-renowned center for sustainability with Detroit at its epicenter, a real hub of innovation and best practices. I think there's so much great work being done by so many different businesses and organizations. And I think we're really on the cusp of becoming known for that in a even larger way, perhaps, than we already are. But
absolutely.
Talk a little bit more about mobility and how you view it. And its future in Southeast Michigan and Detroit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just start with the definition to ground all of us. I'm sure many of your listeners work in the space or are familiar with it, but just for those who might not be, our definition of mobility is the movement of people, goods, and information, helping those people, goods, and information move more freely, have more accessible to transportation options, multimodal options, all the way, people typically think of a car, right? But we have many options to help people complete the trips, and for goods and information to complete the trips on where they need to go as well. Everything, it covers land, air, space, and sea. So everything from, on land, right? Scooters, vehicles, transit options, to in the air, right? We've heard about aerial mobility and delivery of goods, to a lot of innovation in the state around maritime testing, solar powered boats. And so, for us, that's how we define mobility: the movement of people, goods, and information, and then that land, air, and sea. And then, our vision as an office, and again, for the whole state of Michigan, and then I'll dive into Southeast Michigan and Detroit specifically, is to strengthen the economy around mobility and electrification, in three areas: around safer, greener, and more accessible transportation, but for all Michigan residents, right? So we're trying to be innovative, introduce new technology solutions that solve real challenges that are happening on the ground, and address what those needs are. And so, we were very proud we collaborate with private and public sector partners across the state. And so to keep us all aligned on a set of goals, we announced a state strategy at the auto show last year with 11 goals, focus on 3 pillars. And that really showcases the type of work we're working on, not just in our office, but with cities like Detroit, and partners across the state. So transitioning and growing our mobility industry and workforce, providing safer, greener, and accessible transportation infrastructure, because infrastructure plays a huge role in what we're talking about, and then leading the world in mobility and electrification policy and innovation. And that's why it was so key for our office to have not only programming to help companies grow here in the state, but that policy to go side by side. Because if you think about it, when scooters landed in a city, cities didn't have policies around scooters, right?
They certainly didn't.
They certainly did not. So policy is a huge piece as we're introducing innovation, and sustainability is a huge piece for us. And I'm so proud that we get to focus on not only electrification, like it's in our name, but alternative fuels broadly, hydrogen and others, and help the city of Detroit and the state reach their carbon neutrality goals. The state has a carbon neutrality goal by 2050, and transportation is a huge piece of that. And it's great to see Southeast Michigan and Detroit really focused in these areas and willing to test innovative solutions. A huge role that our office plays is providing grants for testing, not only at test sites, but also in real world settings. So it's great to see the city of Detroit, just one example. They introduced a transportation innovation zone around the Michigan Central train station. Michigan Central is bigger than just the train station, but many of us know the train station in Detroit. And so that's a big area around the train station where it makes it easier for companies to engage the community, receive the permits they need, and innovate faster. So we're getting solutions out in the world that work for communities and address their needs. And testing is the first piece, right? To see if it works. And then we ultimately want to scale in the region, around the state, and then see these solutions go global.
So, wow, you packed a lot in there.
Yeah, I bet.
There's a couple of great segues because I'd like to talk a little bit more about infrastructure.
Yes.
And the role that it plays. I mean, Governor Whitmer certainly has talked about the importance of fixing the roads, but I suspect
absolutely
infrastructure for mobility goes way beyond just the roads. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we have an entire pillar of our state strategy focused on infrastructure because we know how important it is. I'll run through all the goals there and start with electrification. So the first 2 goals in that bucket, one is addressing the needs of electric vehicles on our roads. So we estimate that there'll be 2 million electric vehicles on Michigan roads by 2030. And so we need the charging stations. And I'm going to go beyond stations and say charging solutions to support those 2 million electric vehicles, because one project that we were very happy to see land in Michigan and a company innovate in Michigan is Electrion. It's an Israeli-based company. And I was able to go to Israel to see their solution, and then now they're testing it here in Detroit. And so it's great to see that we're the first state where they're testing it and then ultimately looking to scale it as well. So sorry, there's a lot of buildup there, but their solution is inductive charging. So what that means is there are actually coils underneath the pavement that you cannot see. So you might drive down a road and there are coils under there for charging. And you wouldn't know it yet because we're testing it with shuttles. So we're going to actually install a receiver on the bottom of a shuttle so that a shuttle driving on a fixed route can drive over those coils and receive a charge as it's driving. So that has so many interesting use cases, right? So that shuttle doesn't need to stop to charge throughout the day because it's on that fixed route. It's driving over those coils that are under the pavement. Or you can think about a delivery truck, right? If there are coils in a very specific spot where a delivery truck is pulling up to a building, there's that time where the driver needs to load up the packages, take them into the building, deliver them. That truck is just sitting there, right? In that delivery spot. So it'll be great to see, and we have that being tested as well, static inductive charging, where there are coils in a very specific spot where a delivery truck will drive. So those two things are being tested in Detroit, the stretch of road for inductive charging as a shuttle drives over it, and then the static inductive charging as a delivery truck drops off packages. And both of those mean that infrastructure plays a huge role, right? So we had to, you want to align those projects when a road is already being fixed, fix all the damn roads, right, from Governor Whitmer. So a lot of coordination has to happen there to see those other charging solutions introduced in Michigan, and specifically those two are being tested in Detroit. And so that's just one example of how infrastructure plays a huge role. Others are grid resiliency, right? We want to see 80% of the charging happening off peak to manage impacts to the grid. That's that second goal under that pillar. We also want to reduce the number of fatalities and focus on safety. So we need to test more solutions to ensure that's happening, and we're marching towards zero deaths, our zero death campaign here in Michigan. And then we want connectivity of all the transit solutions as well. So it's called a MOS platform, mobility as a service, so that you can easily see, how do I get from this place in Michigan to this place without, maybe you don't have a car, right? You want, and connecting all the different transit options to get there. So any innovative solution we're bringing on to Michigan needs to connect to that MOS platform so that people can see how they can easily get around the state, no matter their circumstances. And we have that equity in mobility as well as we talk about infrastructure.
You really answered a question that I wanted to ask, which was, what are some of the cool projects?
It's a great one to talk about.
Are there any that relate to water or air? You know, those aspects of mobility. I had a really an opportunity to talk with the CEO of the Port of Detroit earlier this week.
Fantastic.
And so it was interesting learning about shipping related aspects of infrastructure. Absolutely. And why infrastructure funding and resources are just so important to making these shifts.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the partnerships with different ports, Port of Monroe, Port of Detroit, all those international crossings, right, are so important for, if you think about supply chain and the movement of freight, how can we be innovative there and making sure those ports are leveraging innovative technologies that are happening and testing them and realizing the efficiencies behind them. So I can give one example. We worked with a company that's homegrown here in Michigan named LilyPad. They have solar charged boats. And so it was great to see, there's many applications there, whether it's passenger transit, passenger ferries, people owning their own boats, but again, contributing to that carbon neutrality goal for the state. And so it's great to see homegrown companies, but our programs are also open to any company in the world, right, who wants to find a place that's easy to do business with, easy to land, grow, scale. So our programs are really open to that. And that's a little bit about the maritime space, but aerial is absolutely fascinating, right? So we work very closely with MDOT's aeronautics department. They're a fantastic team who have partnered with us and the FAA on ensuring safety around aerial mobility solutions, but also innovation at the same time. So sometimes other transit options are just not feasible or efficient. If you think about the movement of medical supplies, right? Maybe in between a hospital and a lab, or if you're trying to get to remote rural spots, aerial mobility can be a safe, reliable, efficient option to solve some real challenges that we just haven't had solutions for in the past. And so it's great to see not only aerial mobility companies coming here to test, but local partners like Michigan Central and MDOT looking to build the infrastructure needed in the sky, right? To support the testing and scaling of these solutions because it's so new. We need to ensure the safety of our residents.
And actually, that's a good segue to another question that I have. You mentioned rural. You a couple times, talked about access for all. Yep. I think that one of the concerns that I know that I hear and that others talk about is all this mobility stuff just for an elite group of people who can afford it?
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about that, about the impact that this is going to have on the community and access for all?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked about that because equitable mobility is a focus of all of our solutions. We need to make sure that all Michigan residents can make those complete trips. And if they're not able to make a trip themselves, the goods and services can come to them. So it's great to see not only a focus on innovation, but addressing real needs of Michigan residents. So I think the first piece for us and for companies who want to test their solutions here in the state is understand the needs of our residents, right? Let's not just introduce technology for technology's sake. Let's really, every grant, every program we have starts with addressing a need of a resident. And so that's why all of our programs require a local partner, and why, one of the things that we measure ourselves on is public-private partnerships. How are we collaborating across the state to making sure that what we're introducing addresses a real need, and then can scale to, positively impact as many Michigan lives as possible. So it needs to involve diverse solutions that meet diverse needs. Community engagement is a huge piece as someone tests and scales here in the state, but not just community engagement at the beginning. It really needs to be along the entire spectrum of the project, and build that trust with the community, right? You don't want to be a spot where they're like, what is that autonomous bot doing here? No, open up your programs, your services to make sure the community is part of that process and brought along from many different aspects, not just in the testing and scaling of it, but even from a workforce standpoint, right? If more mobility solutions are being provided, that also, means more companies are here, right? And the workforce needs of the future are changing. So making sure that's available if there are reskilling, retraining, and workforce training initiatives, that they are open to people who are local and need those jobs and can fill those needs of the future.
So what are some of the hurdles that you see we need to overcome, or that will need to be overcome?
Yeah.
These are some seriously cool projects and ideas that have just so much potential for job creation, or improving access, as well as our sustainability objectives. So what hurdles do you see?
Yeah. So I guess I'm thinking about hurdles specific to a mobility project. So I can start there and expand, but I think the biggest hurdle for any company or solution that's being tested here is finding those local partners, right? And so we can definitely help with that. And that's what's needed to see that long-term success here, not just coming in as making assumptions, right? Finding that local partner, whether it's public or private sector or both, And then finding funding, right? I know that's a big hurdle that a lot of companies come across is this is something new. Who is able to fund it, right? Before we kind of put the final touches on our business model and create those ongoing revenue streams. So we do have a program called the Michigan Mobility Funding Platform for grants for companies at either a test site. We have 9 different test sites we work with, but there are many others in the state. Or the other side of that program is working in a real world setting. So we do provide grants for that initial test, but we do want companies to use that time to test, to build out and understand their business model so that they can scale from there. But, beyond that, more broadly on mobility hurdles, one department I'm really proud to work with all of our partners across the state, but it's been great to work with MDOT's Office of Passenger Transit. So they work with all the transit agencies across the state and are really addressing big mobility, big, hairy mobility hurdles across the state. Think about making payment options more easier with public transit, making public transit easier to use for different audiences, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities. So it's been great to work with MDOT's Office of Passenger Transit to overcome those mobility hurdles through what we call challenges, right? We're spelling out what the need is and then building out a call for proposals and awarding grants to test and address those.
Oh, that's fabulous to hear.
Yeah.
How wonderful. We know that when there's collaboration between the players, you just get farther faster.
You do.
So it's
Absolutely.
wonderful to hear that that's happening.
Yeah.
How is the work that you're doing at MEDC involved in both the connected and autonomous vehicle corridor that we've heard so much about between Ann Arbor and Detroit? I'm really curious about that and the Corktown mobility projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we've been talking about before, infrastructure plays a huge role, right? And this project is case in point for infrastructure, the role of infrastructure in mobility projects. So as you think about a corridor, it's a designated lane, right? That provides more connectivity between your vehicle and other vehicles and your vehicle and the infrastructure to enhance those safety vehicles that are already exist in most vehicles today and will continue to be enhanced with future vehicle models that are coming on the market. And so our role in that, and we definitely use that project as a model to attract more Cavenues, more projects like that to the state. That contract is really between MDOT and Cavenu, but we were able to work with MDOT to identify the partner to launch this CAV corridor and ensure that the launching of that project met the governor's goals, right, around mobility, safety, and the state's goals through the state strategy. We also were tuned in throughout. It started with a feasibility study. So we were tuned in throughout the feasibility study, right? This is the first time a connected and autonomous corridor is being developed. So really have to start with all the partners coming around the table and making sure we're ensuring we know what it looks like from many different aspects, right? The business model, the safety standards, because this is something new that we're launching here in Michigan and making sure it's meeting resident needs. So really understanding how the corridor could support larger state mobility and electrification goals. So being tuned in throughout that feasibility study and then making sure the project moves forward, right? It's not easy with new partnerships between public and private sector partners around innovation, things that have never been done before. So making sure the project moves from stage to stage, right? You start with a feasibility study, and then you move on to a pilot, and then you move on to scaling, but making sure each of those pieces are moving forward and the right partners are involved along the way.
So sort of speaking of right partners, I guess I'm curious, sort of the other thing that I often hear from people is how are we connecting or integrating the startup work that's being done in mobility with sort of the greater mobility needs of the community? Could you talk, I think sometimes there's a perception that there's this experimental stuff going on over here and that it doesn't really connect or mean much to me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, because it just starts with a test that only impacts a few people, and you don't really see it until it's fully scaled, right? So yeah, I think startups, emerging companies are absolutely key to ensuring Michigan remains a global leader in mobility and really accomplishes all 11 goals that are in our state strategy. So they are a huge part around innovation, right? That's happening here in the state. They provide those innovative solutions and address those real mobility challenges. And we make sure that we have the programs to support their growth as they're innovating here, right? That there's the culture here to support them, the programs here, the workforce here. We want companies to not only start here, but grow and scale and find long-term success here in the state. So that's where our programs come into play, grants, connections, office space, and leveraging other partnerships that we have in the state. So all of our work with these startups, emerging companies allow us to focus on both parts of our vision, right? Providing safer, more equitable, and environmentally conscious transportation and meeting the needs of Michigan residents. Because there are a lot of hurdles out there around mobility and transportation. And so we're going to need to test out new things to solve them. And so, it's great to see our office work with companies of all shapes and sizes, talking to someone who has an idea all the way to the biggest corporates, the biggest OEMs, automakers, suppliers. So when I talk about which companies we work with, it truly spans the full spectrum. But we want to make sure that, the focus isn't just on the large companies, because we see so much innovation happening at that level, so much growth that's great for the state of Michigan. But we also want to make sure our innovation-led economic development approach includes that focus on startups and bringing different approaches, different technology solutions here to the state. And so it's great to see what Michigan Central is doing with their innovation district, starting with the opening of their new lab at Michigan Central building right next to the train station, the opening of the train station next year, and then all the smart zones that exist across the state to make sure we have the infrastructure from a programming standpoint, different infrastructure for startups to find a home in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. That is just so great to hear. And it really relates to really one of the last questions that I have, but I think in some ways it's the most important.
Yeah.
And that is, we've often heard that where the real job growth is with smaller companies.
Yes.
So much of the attention is on the big companies because, of course, they can so quickly get things to scale when they have that plan to do that. But the jobs, when you look at where the job opportunities are, lots of times it's with small to mid-sized companies.
Yeah.
So, Kathryn, what do you see in your crystal ball for job opportunities related to mobility for our state going forward? Are you excited about that? Do you think, what do you see?
Yeah, I'm on the inside and I'm so excited about what I see. So I will take any opportunity.
Yay.
Yeah, I'll take any opportunity to talk about the workforce needs that are exciting and happening right here in the state of Michigan. They're innovative. I can tell the culture is changing and new partners are working together to ensure that happens. A lot of students feel like they need to go to the coast to find startups to work for. But I see that changing from the inside. I see a lot of startups deciding to come to Michigan over the coast because we're building out and we have strengths in our programs to support their growth. Everything from hard tech to software. So it's great to see more startups choosing Michigan over other states, and then more innovation studios being stood up to support that growth. More programs and just a bigger focus on innovation-led economic development across state partners. So we just need to get the word out there, right, and continue to have people to tell that story, showcase all the great startups that are growing and scaling here. Some of them are telling their story really effectively and engaging university students, right, for recruitment, and others just don't have the capacity, right? And the state needs to provide more connective tissue between those startup workforce needs and available university and community college graduates, which we're so thankful to have so many universities and community colleges in the state of Michigan. Just making sure we're providing those services of connectivity. We've stood up a lot of workforce initiatives to do that. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation has a talent action team that has been able to stand up many different programs and campaigns to really spearhead that work around an EV Scholars program to provide kind of you could think of a signing bonus to work with some of these companies, stay in the state, and then other job academies to really make sure we're building out that connective tissue. But I'm so excited. Just in summary, I'm so excited to see all the companies that have decided to land here and grow here, and students who are seeing those opportunities. And I just hope more continue to see those opportunities and remain in Michigan and come into Michigan to work, because you can tell if you kind of took out the keywords from my talk today, it's mostly innovation, right? So I'm able to see that happen every day, and we want to engage students in that as well.
I always say to people, if you're having a bad day, if you're feeling kind of down, just go hang out with some of the entrepreneurs in this space.
They've got a fire.
It is. It feels like things are on fire in a good way, and in a good way. That the future is just going to be incredible. Michigan as the global hub for sustainable and innovative mobility solutions. Thank you, Kathryn, for everything you're doing to contribute to that success. And thank you so much for joining us today on the GreenStream.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the GreenStream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.